Boycott Danish goods! Don't visit Denmark! Shame, shame on Denmark!
Shame, shame, shame on Denmark!
Well, just to let you know, it's nearly about 450 plus years, and they've been killing in the Faroe Islands pilot whales, Riso dolphins, but also orcas as well. This is so-called culture, but in my view it's nothing but cruelty. Would you agree?
Yes!
Exactly. And this is going on year in, year out. The one thing I would say is really good, as with all these campaigns, is that you have brought it back to the media's attention by campaigning in this way, by getting back on social media, by sharing the images, and with the work that Sea Shepherd is doing on the ground. People are now beginning to look once again both at Denmark and the Faroe Islands, which it has a direct responsibility, and starting to ask some very difficult questions, saying why this barbarity, why the destruction of these beautiful animals is allowed to go on in one of the countries with the highest per capita income anywhere in Europe. Do any of you think this should go on anymore? Do any of us?
Shame on Denmark!
Now, there's a lot of discussion around the world about culture. The Japanese government will tell us it's culture to kill dolphins in Taiji, Japan. We're told that it's culture to fox hunt, which is going to be a big issue of debate, and I'm going to be outside Parliament on Wednesday with thousands of other people opposing bringing that horrible cruelty back to our countryside. And the Danish government and the people of the Faroe Islands will tell you that they're still killing whales because it's culture. But let me tell you something. Maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago, there was a good case for the Faroe Islands to say we were a very isolated island race. We needed whale meat to keep us going through the year. We didn't have supermarkets and modern food supply chains that we have today. We had a very limited diet. It's a very difficult part of the world, and we had to kill these whales to survive. But that's not the case today. Does anyone believe that a country as wealthy as the Faroe Islands, that comes under the influence and the political control of Denmark, one of the wealthiest countries in the European Union, should be allowing the brutal slaughter of these animals in this way? Does any of us believe today that that is acceptable in the modern civilized world? Exactly. And we must remember exactly what goes on here. The Faroe government will tell you that they've improved welfare standards, that they no longer allow the use of the meat cleavers, the grind knife that we're familiar with, that some of you have got some horrible pictures of the blood and the gore of the result of using this type of equipment on these poor animals. But you still have a situation today where boats and jet skis will drive hundreds of whales into the shore. They will be using hooks to drag them in through their nasal systems and through their blowholes, and then they'll be putting a spinal lance down through the animal to kill it. And they say that they're training people now, give you a day training and a licensing system to allow you to do this. But we know from what Sea Shepherd and other wildlife conservation groups have been doing, they're not monitoring this properly. That the knives are still being used. That there's no way of telling how many animals are being killed. And we just don't know the impact on the population of these whales around the Faroe Islands. But there's been some really good work done over the years. For example, the Whale Protection for Animals worked a lot on this 3 or 4 years ago and went to the Faroe Islands, brought Maury with them to do some polling. And they found out a number of interesting things. Firstly, the Faroe Islands has an important tourism industry. There are people that travel from Britain and across Europe to go to this beautiful part of the world. It's wild, it's a beautiful environment, it's the sort of place that many of us would want to go to. But the reputation of this beautiful part of the world is being terribly damaged by this slaughter of these beautiful animals. And the polling shows us that. Over 37% of people in that Maury poll in 2012 said they would not travel to the Faroe Islands because of this butchery. And even the Faroe Island people themselves recognized, over 83% of them in the poll, recognized that this actually damages their reputation. And then you have the issue about the health of consuming this type of whale meat. The chief medical officer in the Faroe Islands a number of years ago advised people that actually this meat was potentially very dangerous. It's got heavy metals in it, like mercury, cadmium, DDT, things that are dangerous. Women are told not to consume it when they're seeking to have a baby or they're pregnant. Young children are told not to consume it. And the overall advice is that you should only eat this whale meat once a month. Now, the interesting thing is, when you look at the surveys of consumption in the Faroes, that's exactly what people are doing. They still eat whale meat. A majority of them still will. And they're culturally attached to it, but they're only eating it once a month or less. And what happens to a vast majority of these animals is they're not consumed at all. There's a graveyard of dead animals that are left to rot in the coastline around the Faroe Islands as a result of this butchery. This is not killing animals to consume anymore. This is killing animals just so so-called culture can continue. And I think the worst aspect of this for me, and it was this when I looked at it 20, 30 years ago when I was young, as a teenager, was that young children, young teenage children, and those children that are younger than 10 in some cases, are brought down to the seafront to actively participate in this horrible barbarity towards these beautiful animals. Now, we all know that we have a duty of care to the world and the environment. We all know that we have to inform our children. We have to educate them. We have to make them the wildlife ambassadors of tomorrow. The worst aspect of this is that children in this beautiful part of the world in the Faroe Islands are getting brought down to participate at a young age when they know no different, to see this is acceptable. This slaughter and this horrible treatment of these animals is something that they're going to be involved with, and when they have children in 20 years' time, the vicious circle will continue. But the other thing we know is that actually there is a viable alternative to this. The whale watching industry around the world today is worth over $2 billion. It employs over 13 million people. And in countries like Iceland, and in areas like the Shetland Islands, which are very familiar geographically to the Faroes, there is now a growing whale watching business. You can go to those places, many people will book year in, year out to see whales. There's been quite a lot of work done in the Faroes. It's not an easy place to view whales. There are better places. But there is no doubt huge potential, particularly to see orcas, and people will come to see them. And you could make more of an income from viewing these whales. We know that more people would come to the Faroe Islands. We know that their reputation wouldn't be damaged by this savagery, and the pictures you're holding up really tell us what that is about, if they just changed. But we have to work with the people of the Faroe Islands. We have to work with the Danish government to bring about change. It seems tragic to me that the Danish government, the only time they've taken action against the Faroes is when they were forced by the European Commission over herring quotas. Because too much herring was being taken, the European Commission intervened and said something has to be done. But the European Commission and European Union member states, including the United Kingdom, remained very quiet when it comes to the butchery and slaughter of pilot whales and other marine mammals. And the country of Denmark is in contravention of at least 2 conventions that it's signed up to on biodiversity in relation to what's going on here. And that shouldn't be happening either. So the Berne Convention and the Bonn Convention, for example, do set down clear frameworks for protecting these species and clear responsibilities, and all the countries signed up to them. And Denmark is signed up to it, but it's doing nothing about it. Culture should not lead to cruelty. A country which is wealthy and people no longer need to carry out this type of activity should not do it. The European Union should pressurise Denmark, which in turn should pressurise the Faroe Islands. We need to do the same. And it is a carrot and stick approach. You know, I'm looking forward to engaging with a senior government representative of the Faroe Islands who said he wants to talk to me and some of my colleagues at Born Free, partly because we're here today with you, doing what we're doing, and we will continue to do that. We will continue to talk to Danish politicians in Brussels, particularly members of the European Parliament, and we work alongside them on many issues, and they do good work. But we must continue to engage with them and tell them that this is a tragedy, this is a real stain on the reputation of this island race and on Denmark as a nation, and we must bring this to a close. But there's also a stick approach that's worth doing too. And that's why I do welcome what Sea Shepherd is doing. That's why I do welcome the fact they're bringing global attention to this by putting their ships and their people into the Faroe Islands, by confronting the authorities, by confronting the Navy. They are bringing to the attention of the world this savagery. Now, some people will say to you, we don't want that type of activity going on. But without that activity, without the media that's coming out of it, without the celebrities that are involved, without the social media and the media pictures and the reports and the press releases we're seeing, the world would not take any notice. And it would not feed this campaign. It would not allow NGOs like Born Free and the World Protection for Animals and Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society, all these groups that have been working in this area, to do the political engagement. We need it all. We need the campaigning. We need the images. We need Twitter, social media. We need demonstrations. We need Sea Shepherd. And we need to work with these people politically. I think we're at a tipping point. I think they're getting very nervous about the reputational damage to their tourism industry. I think Denmark is increasingly nervous about the reputational damage this is doing to its overall environmental agenda and influence on bigger issues in the European Union. And I think public reaction, even in the Faroes, which are still very much attached to the idea they should have a right to do this, would look very positively at alternatives like whale watching. If it could generate income, if it could bring in money, and if it could stop the protests and stop the reputational damage that they're seeing. And what we must continue to do, and what I took part from some of the polling I've seen, is actually a majority of women don't participate in this. Over 58% are not involved. And actually over 50% of young adult men are not involved either. So to a degree this is a generational thing. But what we must not allow is the older male generation in the Faroe Islands to drag a younger generation into this, to have their children, and then allow this savagery to go on in 20 years. Do you agree with me on that?
Yes!
Exactly. So we can bring this to an end, but we must keep campaigning. We must keep fighting. We won't let this issue go. It's no good us just talking about what's happening in the Solomon Islands in Japan thousands of miles away, when 200 miles off our coastline, this savagery goes on, and we do nothing to talk about it. So we will continue to bring this to everyone's attention. We will continue to show the pictures of the blood in the water. We will continue to show exactly what it means to round up these animals, bring them onto the beach and butcher them in the way that you've seen over the years, which quite rightly horrifies you and horrifies me. And one day, not in the too distant future, we'll look back on this and say it was us, through our work and our hard efforts, that brought this butchery and this madness to an end. That's good for the people of the Faroe Islands, it's good for the people of Denmark, and it's good for all the people of Europe that care about the future of whales and their protection. So let's keep fighting. Thank you.
Yeah!